Feel the courtroom air crackle as arrogant Officer Thorne shoves an unassuming black woman blocking his path. Then, the gut-wrenching reveal: she's presiding Judge Evelyn Reed. Watch his entitled smirk dissolve into sheer panic as she calmly takes the bench, the power instantly shifting. This isn't just disrespect, it's an assault that rips the lid off a cozy network of city influence, silencing activists for profit. Will Thorne's connections save him, or did he just awaken a force the establishment can't control? Dive into Detroit's power struggle. The air in the Coleman Young Municipal Center felt heavy, thick with the ghosts of Detroit's turbulent past and the anxious hum of its precarious present. Judge Evelyn Reed, her posture radiating a quiet authority honed over 2 decades navigating the city's labyrinthine justice system, walked the familiar granite halls. At 58, her presence wasn't commanding through volume, but through a palpable integrity that seemed etched into the fine lines around her discerning eyes. She wasn't the first woman, nor the first person of color, on the circuit court bench, but she was the one who consistently remembered the forgotten, the evicted, the unemployed, the accused whose stories were often lost in the procedural shuffle. Her chambers overlooked the skeletal remains of factories, monuments to an era of industrial might now surrendering to rust and reclamation, a constant reminder of the fragility of power and the resilience of life pushing through the cracks. This morning's docket felt routine: pre-trial motions, a sentencing, the usual tide of human struggle washing up on the shores of justice. Yet, a familiar disquiet settled in her gut, a sixth sense sharpened by years observing the subtle currents of power and prejudice that flowed beneath the court's surface. As she approached the security checkpoint, the guards offered respectful nods. Evelyn offered a curt acknowledgement, her mind already sifting through case files. Inside courtroom 7B, the pre-session atmosphere was charged. Assistant Prosecutor Alastair Finch, perpetually harried, conferred with a public defender. But dominating the space near the prosecution table was Officer Marcus Thorne. Thorne was cut from a different cloth than the beat cops Evelyn often saw. Mid-30s, impeccably dressed even beneath the standard uniform, he carried himself with the frictionless confidence of someone whose path had always been smoothed by connections. His father was a prominent city lobbyist, his uncle a former deputy chief. Thorne wasn't just law enforcement, he was part of the city's circulatory system of influence. He stood impatiently, tapping a polished boot, radiating disdain for the proceedings. He was the arresting officer in a contentious evidence suppression hearing involving a young activist accused of property damage during a housing rights protest. Evelyn, not yet robed, moved towards the clerk's desk near the side entrance to retrieve a document. Thorne, deep in conversation on his phone, gestured dismissively towards the general area where she stood. "Yeah, tell Alderman Cole it's handled," he muttered into the device, his voice laced with casual arrogance. "Just gotta clear this procedural garbage first." He ended the call abruptly and turned, nearly colliding with Evelyn. He didn't recognize her out of robes, out of context. To him, she was merely an obstacle, an anonymous woman in the wrong place. "Excuse me," Evelyn said evenly, her voice calm but firm. Thorne's eyes flickered over her, a micro-assessment devoid of respect. "Watch where you're going," he snapped, his tone laced with impatience. As she stepped aside, his hands shot out, not a slap, but a rough shove to her shoulder, propelling her slightly off balance. It wasn't overtly violent, but it was startlingly physical, deeply disrespectful, an assertion of dominance in a space meant for order. "Civilians need to stay clear," he added, his gaze already drifting away, dismissing her presence entirely. The courtroom, though sparsely populated with early arrivals, a few junior lawyers, a court reporter setting up, 2 other officers loitering near the back, fell into a sudden, sharp silence. Finch's mouth hung slightly open. The public defender froze mid-sentence. The air crackled. Evelyn straightened slowly, the point of contact on her shoulder radiating a cold fire. She didn't react with anger, but with a stillness that drew every eye. She turned, her gaze locking onto Thorne with unnerving focus. He finally registered the focused attention, the sudden drop in ambient noise. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, quickly replaced by irritation. "Problem?" he challenged, squaring his shoulders slightly. "Officer Thorne," Evelyn's voice cut through the silence, devoid of heat but sharp as tempered steel. "Unhand personnel of this court." The formality, the lack of title before her name, only amplified the dissonance. Thorne blinked. He still hadn't placed her. He glanced towards the bench, empty. He looked back at Evelyn, searching for a name tag, a uniform, anything to categorize her. "Personnel?" he scoffed, a smirk playing on his lips. "You work for the public defender?" "Filing clerk?" Evelyn took one deliberate step towards the dais, then another. The bailiff, a sturdy veteran named Miller, shifted uneasily near the jury box. Finch whispered frantically to the PD, That's Judge Reed." Thorne's smirk faltered, confusion warring with ingrained arrogance. Evelyn ascended the steps to the bench, the slight elevation shifting the power dynamic irrevocably. She turned, standing behind the seat of judgment, her eyes never leaving Thorne. The transformation was instant. The anonymous woman was gone, replaced by the embodiment of the court's authority. Thorne froze. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a mask of disbelief. The air thickened, heavy with unspoken consequences. The shove, minutes ago an act of casual disrespect, now hung in the air like a guillotine blade. He hadn't just pushed a woman, he'd assaulted the presiding judge in her own courtroom. The procedural garbage he'd dismissed was about to become the machinery of his own reckoning. Silence stretched taut, punctuated only by the low hum of the ventilation system. Officer Thorne stood rooted, his gaze fixed on the woman now occupying the seat of power, the transformation from perceived subordinate to ultimate authority complete and devastating. He opened his mouth, then closed it, the reflexive excuses dying on his lips. The two officers at the back exchanged wide-eyed glances, suddenly finding the floor tiles intensely interesting. Bailiff Miller moved subtly closer to the bench, his hand resting near his sidearm, a silent guardian. Judge Reed clasped her hands, her knuckles white but her demeanor outwardly serene. She let the silence press down, a tangible weight forcing everyone present to confront the gravity of the moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but carrying an edge that sliced through the tension. "Officer Thorne," she began, each word deliberate, "did you, or did you not, place your hands on me with force in this courtroom moments ago?" Thorne swallowed hard. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a dawning panic. "Your Honor, I didn't recognize you," he stammered, the excuse sounding flimsy even to his own ears. "You weren't robed." "I thought." "You thought what, officer?" Reed interrupted, her tone sharpening slightly. "That my presence here was insignificant? That physical contact was an acceptable form of address for someone you didn't immediately categorize as important?" She leaned forward almost imperceptibly. "Your lack of recognition is not a defense. It is, perhaps, the crux of the problem. Answer the question, yes or no." The air crackled again. A young lawyer near the back fumbled with their phone, surreptitiously activating the camera. This was no longer just a breach of decorum, it was evidence crystallizing in real time. Thorne's jaw worked. Yes, he finally conceded, the word barely audible. But it was a mistake. A misunderstanding. A misunderstanding predicated on an assumption, Reed countered swiftly. An assumption about who deserves respect in this space. Her eyes swept the room, acknowledging the silent witnesses. "Bailiff Miller, please ensure the courtroom security recordings for the past 15 minutes are preserved and flagged." "Ms. Davies," she addressed the court reporter, "ensure Officer Thorne's admission is accurately reflected in the preliminary transcript." Thorne took an involuntary step back. The efficiency, the immediate procedural lockdown, signaled this was spiraling beyond his control. His connections, his father's influence, they felt distant, useless within these four walls under Reed's unwavering gaze. "Your Honor, this is disproportionate," he protested, trying to regain footing. "It was crowded, I was focused on my call." "You were dismissive, officer," Reed stated flatly. "And then you were physical." In a United States courtroom. Towards a sitting judge. She paused, letting the weight of the titles land. "Your focus, or lack thereof, does not mitigate the act." She turned to the still stunned assistant prosecutor. "Mr. Finch, given the circumstances involving the arresting officer and the matter currently before us, I find it necessary to address potential conflicts and the immediate issue of Officer Thorne's conduct." Before Finch could respond, a side door opened and a man in a sharp suit entered, Martin Kellerman, Thorne's union representative, already alerted. Kellerman, known for his aggressive defense of officers, moved towards the prosecution table with practiced urgency. "Your Honor," Kellerman began, his voice smooth but firm, "perhaps we can discuss this matter privately?" Officer Thorne is prepared to offer a sincere apology for any misunderstanding. Reed met Kellerman's gaze. "Mr. Kellerman, the time for private discussion passed the moment Officer Thorne laid hands on me in open court. This is now a matter of record." She gestured towards Thorne. "Officer Thorne, you will remain present. Bailiff Miller, ensure he does not leave the courtroom. Mr. Kellerman, you may observe, but you will not interfere at this time." Her authority was absolute, Kellerman's usual tactics rendered impotent. She then addressed the court at large. "The hearing on People v. Davis is postponed. This courtroom will be cleared of all non-essential personnel pending further instruction." As lawyers and clerks filed out, whispering amongst themselves, Evelyn watched Thorne. His face was a mixture of disbelief, fury, and burgeoning fear. He shot a look towards Kellerman, a silent plea for intervention, but the representative could only offer a tight-lipped shake of his head. Evelyn felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This wasn't just about Thorne's arrogance. The speed of Kellerman's arrival, the mention of Alderman Cole on Thorne's call, it hinted at deeper currents. Thorne wasn't just an entitled cop, he was a node in a network, and she had just inadvertently triggered its defense mechanisms. The tremors were just beginning. The following days were a study in controlled chaos. Judge Reed formally documented the incident, requesting an internal investigation by the Detroit Police Department and, crucially, notifying the Michigan Judicial Tenure Commission, an independent body overseeing judicial conduct, but also implicitly, conduct towards the judiciary. Thorne was placed on administrative leave, a standard procedure, but the official silence from police command and the mayor's office was deafening. It felt less like due process and more like the circling of wagons. Evelyn found an unexpected, albeit quiet, ally in Leo Kaufman, her senior law clerk. Leo, a meticulous researcher in his late 20s with an almost photographic memory for case law and city politics, had been with her for 3 years. He was fiercely loyal, his quiet demeanor masking a sharp intellect and a deep sense of justice mirroring her own. "They're trying to frame it as incidental contact," Leo reported grimly one afternoon, sliding a printout of an internal DPD memo across her desk. The memo, leaked anonymously, downplayed the shove, focusing on Reed not being robed and Thorne being distracted by official business. "Incidental contact doesn't require an alderman's ear beforehand," Evelyn murmured, tapping the memo. Thorne mentioned Alderman Cole on his call just before it happened. Why involve Cole in a routine evidence suppression hearing for alleged property damage? Cole chairs the Zoning and Economic Development Committee, Leo supplied instantly. He's heavily involved in the riverfront redevelopment projects. The activist Thorne arrested, Maya Davis, her group has been protesting displacement caused by exactly those projects. A cold realization dawned on Evelyn. Thorne wasn't just arrogant. He might have been protecting something specific. Running interference. The case wasn't just about property damage, it was about challenging powerful development interests. Thorne's presence, his call to Cole, it suggested coordination. Working discreetly after hours, Leo began cross-referencing Thorne's arrest patterns, case assignments, and connections. A pattern emerged. Thorne frequently handled arrests related to protests against specific development zones. Cases involving him often saw Assistant Prosecutor Alastair Finch assigned, known for offering plea deals that effectively silenced activists. And Thorne's father's lobbying firm represented several major developers involved in those same contested zones. It's not just Thorne, Leo concluded, presenting a complex web drawn on a legal pad. It looks like a triangle: political influence via Cole, enforcement via Thorne, and legal maneuvering via Finch, possibly benefiting the developers his father represents. As they dug deeper, the subtle intimidation began. Anonymous op-eds appeared online questioning Reed's temperament, citing unnamed sources worried about her activist leanings. Her official court schedule was mysteriously misplaced twice in 1 week, causing minor disruptions. She started noticing the same unmarked sedan parked down the street from her Grosse Pointe home on different evenings. Nothing overt, nothing directly threatening, just enough friction to create unease, to make her question if she was being paranoid. One evening, reviewing files late in her chambers, she received a call from a blocked number. No voice, just the distinct sound of a ticking clock for 30 seconds before the line went dead. It was psychological warfare, designed to fray nerves, to remind her she was challenging something entrenched and unseen. They aren't just defending Thorne, Evelyn told Leo, the unease hardening into resolve. They're defending the entire apparatus. The initial incident, Thorne's crude assertion of dominance, had inadvertently cracked the facade of a much larger structure. She could feel the pressure building, the system pushing back, trying to seal the fissures Thorne's blunder had exposed. The question wasn't just about holding Thorne accountable anymore, it was about whether she dared to pull on the threads they were so desperate to keep hidden, even if it meant bringing a part of the city's power structure down around her. The cracks were there, but exposing them fully carried immense risk. The pushback escalated from subtle pressure to a full frontal assault. Martin Kellerman, Thorne's union rep, filed a formal motion demanding Judge Reed's recusal from any proceedings related to Officer Thorne or the Maya Davis case, citing clear personal bias stemming from an unfortunate workplace misunderstanding. Simultaneously, a complaint, suspiciously detailed and likely fed by internal sources, was lodged with the Judicial Tenure Commission, accusing Reed of creating a hostile environment and overstepping her authority in the initial confrontation. The Detroit Chronicle, a newspaper often sympathetic to the city's establishment, ran a front-page story headlined, "Judge Under Fire, Questions Mount Over Courtroom Confrontation." The article quoted anonymous police sources expressing concern about Reed's increasingly adversarial stance towards law enforcement and hinted at past rulings deemed anti-business. It was a classic smear campaign, designed to erode her credibility and paint her as the aggressor, an emotionally compromised judge unfit to preside. Evelyn felt the walls closing in. Calls came from the chief judge, carefully worded inquiries about maintaining judicial impartiality and the importance of de-escalation. It was clear the pressure was being applied from multiple angles: political, departmental, and through the media. One afternoon, she found herself face-to-face with Lawrence Vance, senior partner at the city's most powerful law firm, the same firm representing the developers Thorne's father lobbied for. Vance, radiating expensive tailoring and quiet menace, requested an informal chat in her chambers. "Judge Reed," Vance began, settling into a chair opposite her desk, his tone smooth as polished concrete, "we all respect your long service to this city. But this situation with Officer Thorne, it's becoming unnecessarily disruptive." "Disruptive, Mr. Vance? Or revelatory?" Evelyn countered, meeting his gaze evenly. Vance smiled thinly. "Semantics. The fact is, Officer Thorne made a mistake, perhaps fueled by the stress of his duties. Pushing this risks undermining public confidence not just in the DPD, but in the collaborative spirit needed to move Detroit forward. Especially, he added, letting the implication hang, regarding vital economic development projects that benefit everyone. Benefit everyone? Or benefit your clients and the politicians they support? Evelyn leaned forward. Are you here as concerned citizen, Mr. Vance, or as an emissary for the interests Officer Thorne seems so keen to protect? Vance's smile tightened. I'm suggesting a path towards resolution. Officer Thorne accepts disciplinary action, perhaps sensitivity training. The union withdraws its motion. The tenure commission complaint fades away. Things return to normal. He paused. Dragging Alderman Cole's name, or influential developers, into this, it serves no constructive purpose. It only creates friction. Friction, Evelyn repeated softly, the word echoing Thorne's initial dismissal. Sometimes friction is necessary to expose where the structures are unsound. Vance stood, the cordiality evaporating. Judge, some structures are load-bearing. You start hammering away indiscriminately, you risk bringing the whole roof down. On everyone. The threat, though veiled, was unmistakable. He wasn't just offering a deal, he was warning her of the consequences of refusal. Later that evening, Leo Kaufman brought more news. Finch is trying to get the Davis case reassigned, he reported, his expression grim. He cited scheduling conflicts, but the timing, it feels like they're trying to bury it, get it away from any potential scrutiny stemming from Thorne. Evelyn stood by her window, watching the city lights flicker against the encroaching darkness. Vance's words echoed in her mind. Bring the whole roof down. They weren't just trying to save Thorne, they were protecting a system built on convenient alliances and managed injustice. They had underestimated her resolve, assuming she would fold under pressure like so many others. Now, they were deploying their heavy artillery. She had documented Thorne's actions, Leo had mapped the network's connections. The question was no longer if she should fight back, but how. Releasing everything she suspected would ignite a firestorm, potentially ending her career and engulfing figures far beyond Thorne. Staying silent felt like a betrayal of everything she stood for. The counterattack was in full force, demanding a response that would irrevocably alter her path, and perhaps the city's. Judge Evelyn Reed chose her moment carefully. Not through leaks or back channels, but in open court, during a routine motions hearing unrelated to Thorne or Davis. Before concluding the session, she addressed the assembled lawyers, clerks, and the handful of journalists always present. Her voice was measured, devoid of personal grievance, but infused with the solemn weight of her office. Members of the bar, personnel of the court, she began, the room falling silent. An incident occurred within this courthouse several weeks ago involving myself and Officer Marcus Thorne of the Detroit Police Department. Subsequent events and information brought to my attention have raised serious concerns regarding potential systemic issues extending beyond that single interaction. She didn't name names beyond Thorne's. She didn't detail Leo's web of connections. Instead, she spoke about the fundamental principles of justice, impartiality, transparency, and the absolute necessity of equal regard under the law. When questions arise that touch upon the potential entanglement of law enforcement, political influence, and the fair administration of justice, particularly concerning matters of significant public interest such as housing and development, she continued, her gaze sweeping the room, it is incumbent upon the judiciary not merely to react, but to ensure the integrity of the process is rigorously examined. She then announced she was formally requesting the presiding judge assign an independent special master, potentially from outside the county, to review the circumstances surrounding the Maya Davis case, including the actions and communications of all involved parties, explicitly mentioning the need to examine interactions between law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, and relevant city officials. She also stated she would fully cooperate with the Judicial Tenure Commission's inquiry into her own conduct, welcoming transparency. It wasn't a fiery exposé, but a calculated, procedural maneuver that placed the intertwined issues squarely in the lap of the wider judicial system, making them impossible to ignore or bury quietly. It forced the hand of the establishment without resorting to overt accusations that could be easily dismissed as personal vendetta. The fallout was immediate but fractured. The special master was eventually appointed, albeit after weeks of political wrangling. The investigation into the Davis case deepened, uncovering procedural irregularities and communications between Thorne, Finch, and Alderman Cole's office that strongly suggested improper coordination. Alastair Finch abruptly resigned, citing personal reasons. Alderman Cole vehemently denied any wrongdoing but faced intense media scrutiny and calls for an ethics investigation. Officer Marcus Thorne, facing mounting internal pressure and the special master's probe, accepted a deal: a lengthy suspension, mandatory retraining, and transfer to a desk job, effectively ending his street career. He avoided criminal charges related to the initial shove, which was ultimately framed in official reports, despite Reed's testimony, as unprofessional conduct rather than assault. He never faced public consequences for the deeper web of influence he represented. Lawrence Vance's law firm issued a statement reaffirming their commitment to ethical practices, and the developers continued their projects, albeit under a slightly brighter, more critical spotlight. The Tenure Commission inquiry into Judge Reed concluded months later, finding no grounds for disciplinary action but issuing a mild advisory note about maintaining judicial decorum even when faced with provocation. The smear campaign faded, but a residue of suspicion lingered in some quarters. Evelyn Reed remained on the bench. She hadn't brought the roof down, as Vance had warned, but she had exposed significant cracks in the foundation and forced repairs, however incomplete. Thorne was sidelined, Finch was gone, Cole was damaged. Yet, the underlying system of influence, the interplay of money, politics, and power, remained largely intact, wounded but adaptable. Standing once again by her chamber window, looking out at the Detroit skyline, a landscape of persistent struggle and defiant hope, Evelyn felt no sense of triumph. Justice, she reflected, wasn't a single verdict or a dramatic downfall. It was the slow, arduous work of pushing back against entropy, of demanding light in shadowy places, of insisting, again and again, on the inherent dignity of every individual caught in the gears of the machine. Thorne's shove had been a moment of friction, revealing a deeper corrosion. Had she won? Or had the system simply absorbed the blow, rerouted its circuits, and prepared for the next challenge? The dawn felt uncertain, the path forward long and shadowed. The responsibility, she knew, didn't end with a single case or a sidelined officer. It was a constant vigilance, a burden shared by anyone who believed that justice wasn't merely an ideal, but a foundation desperately, perpetually, in need of reinforcement. The question lingered, not just for her, but for the city watching: when the powerful stumble, who ensures they fall towards justice, and who simply helps them find their footing again?